I swear to God, nothing like this ever happens to me. What's going on, everybody? I'm Jay. Welcome to Square Pegs. Glad you're here if you're a new viewer. Glad you're back if you're a returning viewer. Longtime viewers of the channel will know I don't normally do pickups videos. They're not really my thing. But every once in a while, you'll land upon that perfect score that just needs to be talked about, that needs to be shared. And that happened to me this weekend. So this past weekend, I was in Allegan, Michigan. We do an annual camping trip over the Halloween weekend. And that's what we were doing with my family. And one of the things I like to do is there's a Goodwill there. And you never know what you're going to find at Goodwill. It's a bounty of possibility. And I've had a lot of things throughout my life at Goodwill over the years. Tiki mugs, something else I collect. Lots of books, movies. And from the video game side of things, I've found things like Xbox 360 games, or Wii games, or even the rare Super Nintendo game. But what I've never found are Sega Dreamcast games. Until this weekend. I found a stack of Sega Dreamcast games right here. 8 Sega Dreamcast games. Spent $24, and last check, they're worth over 140. So let's go through them all right now. We're going to take a look at each game, show you some gameplay, talk about each game. All right, we're going to go alphabetically because that's what I wanted to do. All right, starting off with Looney Tunes Space Race.
I'm not going to lie to you, I was really surprised by Looney Tunes Space Race because I went into this knowing nothing about this game. For me, the best racing game on the Dreamcast was Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, but I'm going to be honest with you, this one is pushing it for that title right now. It's a brilliant kart racer. There's some flaws with it, don't get me wrong. Like, it's definitely an early 2000s, late 90s game, but the cast of characters is excellent. You can play as Bugs, Daffy, Wile E. Coyote, Sylvester, Elmer Fudd, Yosemite Sam, Porky Pig, Marvin the Martian, Taz, Granny, or the King of the Instant Martians. And there's a bunch of different Acme objects that you're able to collect and use in the game. It's really clever. This is a significantly better game than I would have expected it to be. And it's so well put together, and the voice acting in the cast is just brilliantly done that you can't help but have fun and feel like you're in a great Looney Tunes short. Like I said, there's some flaws. The game is a bit weird with the hit detection on the items, and some of the items aren't really all that fun to use, but overall, this is a great racer, and I had an absolute blast with it. And hey, it's worth $39.20 at the time of this recording. And I got it for $3. Zero complaints there.
Up next, one I've never actually played, Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX.
I've been told a lot of times how much fun Matt Hoffman Pro BMX is, and seeing it on the shelf, I really wanted to get it because I'm a huge fan of the Tony Hawk series. And I'll be honest with you, I can see why people would like this one, but this really isn't a game for me. I have a really hard time kind of grasping the fact that you just go backwards on the bike, and I feel like I've screwed something up. And it feels like the controls from Tony Hawk 1 and not kind of the cleaned up and more user-friendly controls from Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. So, didn't have a ton of fun with this game, but it's something that I want to spend more time with because I see the promise and I see that there's something here that makes people love it. So, while Matt Hoffman Pro BMX isn't a game for me right now, I'm definitely going to be spending some more time with it, and I'm looking forward to it because, while, like I said, it didn't connect right now, I can see the brilliance behind the game.
One of the single greatest games on the Dreamcast, Sega Bass Fishing.
Enjoy your fishing.
While I will admit that this game is significantly more enjoyable with the fishing pole controller, Sega Bass Fishing is legitimately one of my favorite experiences on the Dreamcast. I played this game constantly when I first owned my Dreamcast back in the mid-2000s. And I just loved everything about this game. Like, this and Samba de Amigo were like the two games to me on the Dreamcast that really showed what the system was capable of. Because it gave you an alternative way to play a game. It wasn't just use the controller and go. You were able to use these different peripherals that did different things that made the games come to life. And that fishing pole controller, which, God, I cannot wait to go to the Detroit Retro Game Show and to Torg to try to find one so I can add it back to my collection and be able to play this game the way it's meant to be played. It's just such a great experience. Even on the controller, this game's fun. It's super simple. It's arcade action. It's just a great time. And this is coming from someone who hates fishing. I hate going fishing, but video game fishing? That's another story. This is brilliant.
Next up, a really cool compilation here, Sega Smash Pack Volume 1.
If you've been around the channel for any amount of time, you know I'm a sucker for a great compilation disc or collection. And this one looked really promising on the outside looking in. You get Sonic the Hedgehog, Altered Beast, Golden Axe, Revenge of Shinobi, Streets of Rage 2, Vector Man, Phantasy Star 2, Shining Force, Wrestle War, Columns, Virtua Cop 2, and Sega Swirl. And that, to me, is a heck of a lineup, and I was really intrigued by what this offered. Now, I've only played Sonic so far, but to me, this is kind of disappointing. Like, this is the only disc that I picked up where I was like, that's kind of a miss. But Sonic just isn't right. The music and the sound effects are off. The gameplay is a little bit slower. It just doesn't quite feel right, especially when I compare it to what Sega was able to do with something like Sonic CD, which felt so fast and so natural and so great like a real Sonic game. This one just completely misses the boat. Now, I've got other games on here to play. Let me know if you have played Sega Smash Pack Volume 1 before. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything on here really worth playing, or if everything kind of falls victim to that kind of strange port of the game onto the Dreamcast. But I definitely want to check some stuff out. Like, I've never played Wrestle War, and Sega Swirl is something I've heard of, but I've never actually played before either, and it's always nice to have another way to play Shining Force and Phantasy Star 2. But yeah, right off the bat, Sonic, not a huge hit, but do let me know. Let me know in the comments down below if this is worth checking out.
Another really awesome game, and one that I've never actually owned throughout my years of owning a Dreamcast. Sonic Adventure.
Yeah, believe it or not, I've never owned Sonic Adventure. I've played it a bunch of times, but I've never owned it, and it's self-explanatory why I had to pick this one up, right? Like, this is the signature Dreamcast game. It's a fun Sonic game. Like, if you haven't played this one, you owe it to yourself to do so. I've just never owned it. Glad to own it now. Glad to have it in the collection. I dig the fact that this is the Sega All-Stars version, which actually makes it a little bit more valuable than the original release. It actually puts it at around $39 in value, which is super cool. It's a great game. Happy to have it.
Tomb Raider Chronicles. Not a fan of the original Tomb Raiders, but never played this one, so let's take a look.
Oh, Tomb Raider Chronicle. All right. So there's a series that's a brewing in my head right now of video game series that I just don't get into that other people seem to love. And for me, kind of that first bash of Tomb Raider games that released on the PS1 and consoles around that era fall firmly into that category. And this one, unfortunately, lands there as well. And a lot of the problem I have with this is the tank controls. Like, it's just an unnatural way to play a video game. It's not a pleasant experience. And I understand that that's a limitation of the Dreamcast and kind of the design ethos of Eidos at the time, where things were simplified and controlled in that regard, because otherwise it would be moving too fast to be able to load the game. But it's still not an enjoyable experience, especially when compared to modern day games. I will say this one looks pretty good. For that original Tomb Raider series, which I was never a big fan of the look of, this one actually looks really nice. Lara actually looks like a woman, not a polygonal pile of triangles. It's got promise, I will say that. I'm going to be spending some more time with it. I do owe it to myself and to that series to actually spend a bit more time with it, but I will say for this one right off the bat, with the controls being as wonky as they are, didn't leave a great first impression, but I'm going to come back to it sometime. And before anyone jumps on me for not being a huge fan of the Tomb Raider series, I love the new Tomb Raider series. It's actually one of my favorite series of games. Rise, Shadow, and Tomb Raider is the original one of that trilogy, right? Yeah, those three are brilliant games, and I've spent a ton of hours with them. Just the original run of Lara games just didn't work for me.
And then two of my absolute favorites, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
When the worst game in your series is the first game and it spawns brilliant sequels, you know you've hit on something really magical. I remember when Tony Hawk's Pro Skater initially released, I played it heavily on the Nintendo 64, and there were so many hours pumped into that game and far too many beers drank to really remember them all fairly well. But I remember vividly having a great time with it and being able to play it and hand the controller off in between sessions between my friends and I. It was something I loved. Now today it's a little rough around the edges. The controls aren't great, the graphics aren't great, soundtrack is amazing, but that's something you're just gonna have to trust me on because I can't play it on here without getting a copyright strike. But the gameplay itself, a little rough around the edges, and especially playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, right after this one, really showcased exactly the weaknesses that this game had and how much better THPS 2 was.
and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
Everything the original Tony Hawk Pro Skater did, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 does so much better. Graphics are miles better. The soundtrack is somehow better than the first game, which already had a killer soundtrack. The controls are improved. It's just an overall better experience. Like, jumping into game was like riding a bike. I didn't feel like I was fumbling with the controls at all whatsoever. I was able to just hop in, go, and have a good time. And then you add on the added bonuses of the Create a Skater, of the Killer Career Mode, of the Create a Park. It's just a brilliant title. It's the best of the Tony Hawk franchise as far as I'm concerned, and and that's saying a lot, because the entire series is at least fun, or at least creative in some major way, but this is the best one from top to bottom, like pound for pound, the best in the series. I love this game. I'm so happy to have it back in my collection. Like, I already own the 1 and 2 remaster for the Xbox Series, but having the originals now on the Dreamcast really makes me happy.
Awesome score, as far as I'm concerned. All the discs are in immaculate condition, and frankly, it's just incredible to be able to find stuff like this. To be at the right place at the right time, to get that perfect score. Like I said, I spent $24 on this. They were $3 each. Price charting has it worth over $142. And as my wife reminded me, it's only worth that much if someone will buy it, but I'm still proud of the score. Let me know in the comments down below, what's your greatest score you've ever found at a store like Goodwill or Salvation Army, anything like that, or at a thrift store? Let me know if there's anything on here you're particularly excited about. If you want to see more Dreamcast content, I just doubled the size of my Dreamcast library, so I'm stoked about that. Till next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. Remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.